Most of us have lost a loved one, someone that we have known and loved and counted on over the years, dies and leaves us alone with a huge void in our lives. And the nearer and dearer that person was to you, the vaster the void left in their absence. And you know how that feels. Many of you do. People go for years slowly healing from that loss, slowly reorienting their day-to-day lives without that person there. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years who experience that person's ongoing presence in their life, even in their absence. People who are grieving a loved one sometimes have this uncanny sense that the person is near to them. And what I tell them in those situations is that the life of those who have died is far nearer to us than many of us would believe. That the barrier between life and death is permeable. It's not a wall. And God's people have always lived with a sense of what we call in the Creed, the communion of the saints. That the ongoing life of those who die in the Lord overlaps with ours in the thin places of life where heaven and earth come together, particularly at the altar in worship. Now, these near-death experiences we've been studying for the last almost month now, they confirm and they clarify a lot about the communion of saints. And you might remember Jeff. He was the dad who dozed at the wheel while driving his family on the highway, and they drifted off the road. They flipped the SUV several times. And Jeff and his wife and their younger son died in that wreck, leaving their older son, 4-year-old Spencer, alone and alive. And Jeff and his wife and Jesus, there in heaven, agreed that he needed to return to live on with young Spencer. That was the start of a very long recovery from the injuries that he sustained in that car wreck, during which he had another near-death experience in the hospital. Suddenly, Jeff found himself standing on 2 healthy legs, entering a long, bright hallway, at the end of which he found a crib. And rushing up to the crib, he looked inside to see his son, Griffin, asleep. Now, I'd like to read you his impression. There was Griffin, alive and well. He slept so peacefully. I looked at him and took in every detail, how his chubby little hands lay so peaceably beside his perfect face, how his hair lay gently across the tops of his ears. I reached into the crib and swept him up into my arms. I could feel the warmth of his little body, his breath on my neck, the smell of his delicate hair. He was so familiar, so alive. This is the child who had died in the wreck. I held him close and cried tears of joy as I laid my cheek against his soft little head, as he had always done. It was Griffin. He was alive, and I was with him, holding him in this wonderful place. And then I felt a presence behind me. I felt light and love engulf me. I knew my wife and son were gone, that they had died months earlier, but time didn't exist where I was at this moment. Rather than having them ripped away from me, I was being given the opportunity to actually hand Griffin over to God, to let them go in peace and love and gratitude, and everything suddenly made sense. Everything had a divine order. I could give my son to God and not have him taken away from me. As he held his son, he felt God holding him in the same way. And as he put his son back into the crib, he knew that Griffin was one with God, and so was he, in this place that is more real than anything back in the hospital. As the driver of his family's vehicle that night, the experience of God's love by Griffin's heavenly crib healed Jeff's guilt and remorse. Folks, the greatest love that we ever feel for a spouse, a child, or a friend amounts to just a thimbleful compared to the oceans of love that we will experience for eternity. So maybe you too are grieving the loss of a child or someone else profoundly dear to you. And though it's so hard, you can bring that pain and love to Father God, to entrust that person to him, comforted by his loving embrace in that really real place we call heaven. That's today's Lenten vision, and I'll see you tomorrow.